create that data.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this evening's coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. And for all of those out there who celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you had a wonderful holiday with family and or friends and, of course, lots of good food. We're back with another course of launch goodness tonight. Our Stephen Young is running the technical operations of tonight's broadcast. Adam Bernstein is providing tracking views of the Falcon 9 this evening. Michael Kane has the evening off tonight, but if you're not already, you should be following both Adam and Michael on X, formerly known as Twitter. Here are their handles to make that nice and easy for you. They post lots of great photos from all of our launches here at the Cape, as well as many other goodies connected to and not of the space world. So be sure to give them a follow. Plenty of interesting things to see there. At the center of your screen, you're taking a look at the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket sitting at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. Now, T-minus 57 minutes, 50 seconds and counting before SpaceX will attempt to launch its next mission, beginning to round out the month of November. This will be the Starlink Group 6-30 mission. This will be the 37th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 11:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For our viewers joining from around the world, that is 0420 UTC. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, there's a quick and easy way to do that. Just hit the like button. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel here and ring that notification bell so that you get notifications whenever new videos are posted and you don't miss any of our live streams. Also, feel free to share this stream. It helps more folks to find this live coverage and everything else going on with our channel. Naturally, we can't do these broadcasts without the support of our wonderful channel members and the viewers like you. So thank you to everyone who has helped make a contribution to help support this coverage. If you'd like to be a part of expanding our coverage of the space program, love it if you consider making a donation through the YouTube Super Chat feature or become a YouTube channel member. Membership grants you access to our member-only videos as well as discounts at our online shop. That's shop.spaceflightnow.com, as well as access to 4K live stream views of all the missions going up from the Cape. And as one of our wonderful channel members and fantastic moderators of the live chat, Stephanie B, pointed out, this will be the 17th flight of this particular booster, tail number 1062. Once upon a time, flying for the 17th time would mean you are a flight leader of the Falcon 9 fleet, but these days that is not so, as we are climbing up in the numbers on SpaceX's Falcon 9 boosters. We'll get more into the backstory of this particular booster later on in the broadcast. In addition to the note, I do want to thank Stephanie B and our other moderators for helping to keep things kosher in the live chat. So always appreciate you guys helping us out with these launch broadcasts as we keep things rolling. T-minus 55 minutes, 7 seconds and counting. Less than 20 minutes away from the point at which the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. On the off chance you haven't been with us for one of the recent launches in the last few months, SpaceX is no longer providing mission audio ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count. That being said, we do have extensive experience in covering SpaceX and Falcon 9 missions, so of course we'll help guide you through the count talk about some of the visual cues that we are watching for to let us know things are likely on track with fueling. SpaceX is running its countdown from the Hangar X site here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's the facility where they refurbish the Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, tonight's launch is targeting a T0 liftoff at 11:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 04:20 UTC. They do have multiple backup opportunities overnight until 2:58 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. SpaceX also has backup opportunities during a window tomorrow that opens at 11 p.m. Weather tonight, though, looking pretty ideal for this mission. Coming into tonight's launch attempt, the 45th Weather Squadron pegged the forecast at 90% favorable odds of good weather at liftoff at the opening of the window. It decreases slightly to 80% by the end of the window. Taking a look at views of the Falcon 9 here from our friend Chuck Briggs, helping provide coverage on the tracking front for tonight. Appreciate it as always, Chuck. Good to see you earlier today as well. Today also happens to be the 60th anniversary of an engine that is not flying today, but will be back in use next month. The RL-10 flew for the first time successfully back on November 27th, 1963. Also on an Atlas Centaur rocket. That was an Atlas Centaur 2. It has flown more than 520 times since then. The ULA marking the milestone today with the recognition of the RL-10 and its legacy, currently supporting the Atlas V rocket as well as the Delta IV Heavy vehicle. RL-10 will also be used on the forthcoming Vulcan rocket. As I mentioned, it'll be flying as soon as Christmas Eve next month. RL-10 was also featured as the the engine that powered the interim cryogenic propulsion stage on NASA's Space Launch System rocket that flew for the first time last November. Set to fly again on the Artemis II mission about a year from now, if all things stay on track. Coming back to tonight's mission. T-minus 51 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and take a look at what the countdown looks like as we continue to step through the process getting closer to liftoff. T-minus 38 minutes is the point at which the launch director will call the results of the go-no-go poll for the start of propellant load. Again, we won't hear that poll being called, but that is the time at which it will happen, so keep an eye on the countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If that go is given, propellant load begins at T-minus 35 minutes with a couple of events. Rocket-grade kerosene will be loaded onto both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen will be loaded onto the first stage. T-minus 16 minutes. LOX will start being loaded onto the second stage of the Falcon 9, but before that happens, we'll see a good visual indication that fueling is moving according to schedule. The so-called big vent from the strong back, hard to miss. You'll see that happening at about T-minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds as the feed lines are chilled. In T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and it will protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes ahead of liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. Begins with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up. Then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9, and it will stay in that position until liftoff. At that point, the strong back will pull back much more quickly to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading should be complete for the Falcon 9, at which point the rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Then in the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. In the last 45 seconds, the launch director will give their go for liftoff. Then the engine ignition command would be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the hold-down clamps the command to release the Falcon 9 for liftoff at T0. Again, currently targeting that T0 liftoff time tonight, 48 minutes, 56 seconds from now at 11:20 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 0420 UTC. At T-minus 48 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Again, we're just about 10 minutes away from the point at which the launch director would make that call on the start of propellant load. Do want to thank Kelly Jones for a $20 super chat donation. Really appreciate the support, Kelly. Thank you for your generosity. It says, love what you all do, and we certainly love doing it. So thank you for supporting us in bringing you these live launches every night. And hopefully things stay on track with SpaceX and fueling gets underway as we expect it to. And we'll get an on-time departure for this Falcon 9 rocket kicking off the week after Thanksgiving. T-minus 47 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Question we get asked often is, where is the rocket going? And if I'm in Florida, can I see it? Let's go ahead and address that. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Let's see where this bird is going to fly. Falcon 9, of course, will lift off from the pad that you see there live on the right-hand side of your screen, Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It'll be flying in a southeast trajectory towards the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. Tonight, they're using Just Read the Instructions. The upper stage of the Falcon 9 will continue on with the Starlink satellites. The fairing halves will jettison a bit downrange of the map you see here on your screen as well. SpaceX is using one of its 2 East Coast recovery vessels to scoop up the fairing halves. And tonight, on deck, they're using Doug. Excuse me, they're using Bob tonight. Doug has been out of the loop getting some work done and should be back in service soon. But Bob, holding down the fort, it's out there waiting to recover the first stage of the Falcon 9. The 2 drone ships, of course, were named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, now both firmly in the private sector. But they were the duo that flew the Demo 2 mission back in May of 2020. Key mission that kicked off the commercial crew program really in earnest with the first crewed mission. Boeing set to fly its first pair of astronauts coming up no earlier than April of 2024. Boeing has said that the Starliner spacecraft is expected to be ready from a spacecraft perspective. They would be ready to fly in March, according to the most recent update from Boeing. The reason they're targeting an April launch for Starliner, though, is because of the schedule on the International Space Station. A little bit cramped at the beginning of 2024, since we do have a number of missions heading up that way, starting with the Axiom 3 private astronaut mission to the space station lasting a couple of weeks. And we also have the SpaceX Crew 8 cadre of astronauts and a cosmonaut flying up to station. So all the players looked at the calendar and they decided that April would be the best time frame. So we will see if everything aligns and Boeing is able to make that launch happen that day. Of course, launching on top of a ULA Atlas V rocket. This will be powered, of course, by the RL-10 engine that we mentioned a little bit earlier in the broadcast from Aerojet Rocketdyne. Now T-minus 43 minutes, 42 seconds and counting for the liftoff of this mission, Starlink Group 6-30. Now T-minus 42 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. Want to thank Princessa Colombiana. Hope I'm pronouncing it right, but want to thank you for the $20 super chat donation. Says thanks so much with a bunch of rocket emojis. Well, thank you so much for your kind donation and helping support our coverage this evening. Really appreciate that. The YouTube Super Chat feature is a great way to join the conversation, ask a question if you have some about what's going on with the launch tonight or upcoming spaceflight operations here at the Cape or beyond. Love to bring folks into the conversation as we get closer to liftoff of this particular mission. And we do want to thank Janine Della Sera, one of our channel members, for gifting membership to Paul Shields. Really appreciate the generosity, Janine. And welcome, Paul, to channel membership. Of course, being a channel member has its perks, access to our member-only videos, and the ability to watch all of our Cape missions in 4K. So if you've got a big screen, you can go ahead and cast this launch to the big screen and watch it in the comfort of your own home. You can also get discounts to our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com. So thanks again, Janine. Really appreciate you spreading the Spaceflight Now love. And thanks to Mel Roberts-Harold, one of our regulars joining us again for coverage this evening. Says, hey, everyone. Thanks for the coverage. You're welcome, Mel. Thanks for being here. Says we'll be watching from the very chilly Chicagoland tonight. Straight up 17 degrees. I'm assuming that's in Fahrenheit for those that mostly deal in Celsius. Wouldn't mind being back in Florida now. I will say, having lost my Chicago skin for actually cold weather, it is cold by Chicago standards down here. It's about 57 degrees Fahrenheit. which, considering we've come off some weeks in the mid to upper 70s, it is getting chilly. And later in the week, I know there's some parts of Florida that are going to reach down to 32 degrees and below. So if I may switch to my local news hat for a second, if you have some outdoor plants that are more sensitive to the cold, be sure to either bring them in or make sure they have the proper protection for later in the week for our Floridians that are joining us tonight. And after her Super Chat donation, want to thank Princeka Colombiana and welcome her to channel membership at the Mission Specialist level. Really appreciate the support. And to David Ensley for joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Really appreciate the both of you for supporting us in what we do. We are about 30 seconds away from the point at which the launch director would make that call on the start of propellant load. Again, because SpaceX is not providing mission audio, we will not hear that call out, but that is when they would make the judgment on starting fueling in about 3 minutes. Indications suggest that they are still targeting a T0 liftoff of 11:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, 04:20 UTC. One of the things that we're watching for as we get into the fueling process, if you look at the bottom of the Falcon 9 rocket, there's less color distinction because this booster has got a good bit of soot on it, being that it's flown 16 times before, going for its 17th flight tonight. But if you see just above the tree line, sort of perpendicular to where the lights are at the base of the rocket, you see where it goes from being more of a jet black to sort of a charcoal gray, and there's a line just above that that's a little bit more distinctly white. Right about there, slightly above, is when we'll start to see the frost ring form as the super chill liquid oxygen flows aboard the Falcon 9 rocket. That's a good indication that we're starting to see fueling get underway. So even though we won't hear the call out on the start of fueling in about a minute and a half or so, at about T-minus 33 minutes, I'd say, is about the time when we usually start to see that frost ring form. So keep a weather eye for that, and that'll be a good indication that fueling is moving along. Now T-minus 36 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. T-minus 35 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. As we are coming up on the start of fueling, assuming that the launch director has, in fact, given the go-ahead, let's go ahead and take a quick peek into the future and see what the mission stats will be once the Starlink 6-30 mission is in the books. As mentioned, this will be the 17th flight of this particular first stage booster, tail number 1062. This will be the 277th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 83rd Falcon 9 launch of 2023. This will be the 221st Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This will be SpaceX's 87th orbital launch of 2023. Its 94th orbital launch in the last 365 days. This will be the 157th orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 40, the 212th overall launch from this particular launch site, and the 66th orbital launch from Cape Canaveral in 2023. That is launches from both Cape Canaveral Space Force Station as well as here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. And to represent that in a slightly different graphical form, here's a chart of SpaceX's flights to date, represented in a bar graph. You can see we're really starting to peel away from past history. If you look at 2023 compared to the previous years, more than 20 launches beyond what SpaceX was able to nab in 2022, coming up on triple the number of launches from 2021, so quite the progression for SpaceX here. And of course, the evolution of the pad continues on. SpaceX recently added what you see here, this crew access arm, this photo taken shortly after this was hoisted into place out at pad 40. You can see, taking a look at the live images on the right-hand side of your screen, or this view from Chuck Briggs' camera, you can see the crew access arm firmly in place. SpaceX preparing to duplicate the features it has at pad 39A, where it can support Dragon missions, both crew and cargo, up to the International Space Station. We do have confirmation that propellant load has begun for the launch tonight, so SpaceX committing to that T0 liftoff at 11:20 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. SpaceX also adds that all systems and weather are currently go for launch, which is certainly a welcome development this evening. Now T-minus 32 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Do want to thank one of our channel members, Stuart Kirk, for a $15 super chat. Really appreciate that, Stuart. We were just chatting about the state of the rubber rooms. For quick synopsis for those who are unfamiliar with what the rubber rooms are, they were spaces underneath the pads at Launch Complex 39A and 39B that were protective refuges if needed around launch operations. From what we can tell, the rubber room under Pad 39B has been sealed off. Of course, SpaceX has been leasing Pad 39A from NASA for the better part of a decade at this point, and so it would fall under their purview as to whether or not that will ever be used again or if folks will be allowed inside. That would be a good question for SpaceX, and one that perhaps we can find an answer to in the near future here. Perhaps the next time that SpaceX is holding a teleconference, we can pose that question of them either directly or on the sidelines. But now you've piqued my curiosity, Stuart, so thank you for the question, and hopefully at some point soon we'll be able to get a more definitive answer on what SpaceX may or may not do with that space. But thanks for the super chat. Thanks for something to ponder this evening. Now T-minus 28 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Take a look at the base of the Falcon 9. You start to see a vapor ring forming. Again, we have heard word from SpaceX that they have started fueling, but a good indication visually that fueling is underway. Also worth noting, helium loading is now underway as well onto the pressure vessels on the first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T-minus 27 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Well, we certainly very much appreciate the super chats, and those of you who like to support us with channel membership, that is more than welcome, and we certainly appreciate that. But there's another great way you can help us do what we do this evening with these live broadcasts, just by hitting the like button. Allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this live coverage to more folks as we are approaching 26 minutes, 30 seconds before liftoff. Considering this is the 17th flight of this particular booster, tail number 1062, it's got quite the pedigree, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the history of this particular booster. Its debut came back on November 5th of 2020. It was the launch of the GPS-3 space vehicle, or SV number 4. It was built by Lockheed Martin. This was the fourth of the newer version of the U.S. Space Force's GPS constellation. Like all of the GPS satellites that were named after famous explorers, this one has the nickname of Sacagawea, named after the Shoshone woman who guided Lewis and Clark on their expedition in the 1800s. Next up came the June 17, 2021 launch of another GPS satellite, this being Space Vehicle number 5. This GPS satellite was nicknamed Neil Armstrong, of course, the first person to set foot on the moon. Fortunately, far from the last, as we will re-enter our moon trotting era yet again with the Artemis program, coming more than 50 years after humans last set foot on the moon in 1972 with Apollo 17. So certainly looking forward to the next era of moonwalkers. The third flight of this particular booster came on September 15th, 2021. This was the first time this booster launched humans to orbit, speaking of crewed flights. This sent up the 4-member crew of the Inspiration 4 mission on board the Crew Dragon Resilience. Helped raise a lot of money for St. Jude's Children's Hospital as well. Commanded by Jared Isaacman, who is preparing another quartet of astronauts to fly on another free-flying Dragon mission to begin the Polaris program, Polaris Dawn, targeting liftoff currently no earlier than first quarter of 2024. Waiting to see more on that. Of course, a big watch item for that mission will be the development of the spacesuits that will allow them to do a spacewalk from the Dragon capsule. Coming back to this particular booster, the fourth launch came on January 6, 2022. That was the Starlink 4-5 mission with 49 version 1.5 satellites on board. The fifth launch came on April 8, 2022. This was the second crewed mission that this booster has flown. It launched the Crew Dragon Endeavour and the Axiom 1 private astronauts to the International Space Station. Flight number 6 came 21 days, 6 hours, and 10 minutes later on April 29, 2022, which so far is the shortest turnaround for this particular booster. And not only that, it became the new record for SpaceX, beating the old record held by B-1060 by nearly a week. The seventh flight came on June 8, 2022 with the Nilesat 301 mission for the Egypt-based company Nilesat. Flights 8 through 12 were a series of 5 Starlink missions. Those were Starlink 4-25 on July 24th, Starlink 4-27 on August 19th, Starlink 4-36 on October 20th, Starlink 5-1 on December 28th. And finally, Starlink 5-4 on February 12th. The 13th flight was on March 9th, 2023. That was the OneWeb 17 mission, launching a batch of 40 of OneWeb's broadband internet satellites. This would be the third and final dedicated launch of OneWeb satellites that SpaceX conducted. OneWeb completed its Gen 1 constellation with a launch from the Indian Space Research Organization. The 14th flight of this booster was Arabsat 7B, also known as Batter 8, which launched on May 27, 2023. This communications satellite was built by Airbus for Arabsat. It provides C and KU band coverage for Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. And finally, the 15th and 16th flights of this booster were also Starlink missions. Those were Starlink 6-7 on July 28th, and most recently, 6-23 on October 18th. Quite the pedigree for this particular booster, preparing for its 17th flight tonight. Coming up in 21 minutes and 14 seconds. T-minus 20 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. I want to thank one of our channel members and regulars joining us again, Carrie Rencher, for a $2 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Carrie. Really appreciate that. It says, thank you, Will Robinson-Smith, for your narrating. Well, I'm happy to be in the commentator chair this evening as we are approaching the start of the big event, which should be coming up in just the next, well, right now, as a matter of fact. See the start of the big vent there at the center of your screen. Go ahead and flip to Chuck Briggs' view. You can see that venting happening from another perspective. Also another great angle on the crew access tower and that new crew access arm that I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. We're anticipating that crew access arm coming into play with the launch of the AX-3 mission targeting mid-January for that liftoff. It'll come, we're expecting, right about the same time as far as time of the month that SpaceX would also be launching Intuitive Machines' first Nova C lander that'll be heading to the South Pole of the Moon. So 2 very important missions. That IM-1 mission, though, has to launch from Pad 39A because it will be fueled at the pad, as opposed to, say, Astrobotic's Peregrine lander, which will fly on ULA's Vulcan rocket, and that'll be fueled ahead of encapsulation inside the payload fairings on the Vulcan Centaur rocket. The Nova C needs to be fueled at the pad, and SpaceX is accommodating that particular need for this mission. So that's why we'll see AX-3 going off from Pad 40. Expected to be the first crew mission from that particular launch pad. I want to thank Keith Montgomery for joining us with channel membership at T-minus 18 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Keith, like all of our other channel members, now has access to live 4K views of this and all of our Cape Side launches, as well as discounts at our online shop. That is shop.spaceflightnow.com. And access to member-only videos as well. So thanks for your support, Keith. Really appreciate it. Now T-minus 16 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. See the big vent wrapping up there. Liquid oxygen loading will begin on the second stage momentarily in about 12 seconds or so. RP1 loading on the second stage should be wrapping up right about now, or last minute or so. So fueling continues to move along well. As we're just noting, the Falcon 9 first stage, while it has been loading with propellants, it is not as outwardly frosty as we sometimes see its appearance to be. Possibly because it's a little bit chillier here in Florida, and so there's not quite as drastic of a contrast between the humid Florida air, which is typically warmer as we see fueling operations take place, and the propellant on board. Do want to thank Doug Carver for a $10 super chat donation. Really appreciate that, Doug. Thank you so much for helping to support our coverage this evening. Within the last 10 minutes or so, SpaceX has also been loading cryogenic helium onto the storage tanks of the second stage to help pressurize them as well. It did the same thing on the first stage, starting at about the T-minus 30-minute mark. T-minus 14 minutes, 14 seconds and counting as we prepare to see the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket in now just about 14 minutes from now. Let's go ahead and quickly step through the vehicle, learn a little bit more about the Falcon 9. Stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of that is made up of the first stage, the bottom two-thirds of the rocket. This booster, as we mentioned, has flown 16 times before, going for its 17th tonight. Tail number 1062 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are those 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen and produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment, you see the black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Up tonight, they're using just read the instructions. Do want to thank Weird ALS for $1 super chat donation. Really appreciate that. Above the first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. The image you see there on the right-hand side of your screen are those deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it falls through the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is housed inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. It will be fired twice on today's flight to place the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns, same as the first stage, a combo of RP-1 and LOX. It will ignite a third time after deployment of the Starlink satellites for a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere. Well, it will burn up, eliminating the risk of any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket, you see the payload fairings that are housing those 23 Starlink satellites. Payload fairing made up of a carbon composite material. It is 13.1 meters, 43 feet tall, and 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves of the payload fairings will be recovered, as SpaceX normally does, a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. Again, they're using the recovery vessel Bob tonight. The fairings splash down under parachutes where they are scooped up and brought back to Port Canaveral, where they're brought to SpaceX facilities for refurbishment and reuse. A T-minus 10 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Do want to first thank Pete Carsons for helping us with tracking the rocket tonight, but first, Pete is tracking the full moon. If you happen to take a second to step outside, as I did about 10 or so minutes before we started the broadcast, saw a beautiful halo effect around the moon. And as Pete continues our tour around the moon, taking a look there at the southern end of our own satellites, where The Artemis program will focus its attention, as well as the upcoming IM-1 mission headed to the South Pole of the Moon. As NASA noted, tonight's full moon is known as the frost moon or the snow moon. Now T-minus 9 minutes, 18 seconds and counting before the liftoff of this particular mission. Our thanks again to Pete Carstens for bringing us some great views of our moon tonight. Do want to thank a couple other folks that have helped support our coverage this evening as we get underneath 10 minutes before liftoff. Felix JV191 with a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Felix. Really appreciate that. John Barnard with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate that. Says, always great coverage. Well, we love staying up late and bringing this live coverage to you, so thanks for helping to make that possible. And one of our channel members helping to drive our coverage today and every day, Chuck Croston, joining us at the pad leader level. Thank you so much, Chuck, who now, just in the nick of time, has access to 4K views of this launch, as well as all the others coming from the Cape, as well as discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, and access to member-only videos. But there's another great way you can help support our coverage and what we do here, as we are now less than 8 minutes to liftoff. It's quick and easy. If you just hit the like button, it allows the YouTube algorithm to bring this coverage to more folks, as we are now just a little over 7.5 minutes away from the planned liftoff of this particular Falcon 9 rocket, sending up 23 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. In just about 20 seconds, that will be the beginning of the engine chill sequence, when a small amount of liquid oxygen is flowed through the Merlin engine turbo pumps and cools them ahead of the engine start. That process just about to get underway in the next few seconds here. Now T-minus 6 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. I want to thank Trish MC for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Trish. Says, thanks for your continued dedication to providing great coverage. Love it. Well, we certainly love being out here and bringing that coverage to you. And thanks to folks like Trish and to Mort Dardius. Sorry, Mort, if I mispronounced your last name, but thank you so much for the $2 super chat donation. Says, just for the rocket info. Interesting. Well, that is our goal. We like to educate folks as we get closer to liftoff. And speaking of liftoff, once this rocket does launch, T-minus 6 minutes and counting, this will be the timeline of events that we are watching for. That liftoff expected at 11:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 04:20 UTC. T plus 1 minute 12 seconds is when the Falcon 9 rocket will pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. That'll be followed up at T plus 2 minutes 26 seconds for first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, followed in quick succession by stage separation and the second stage engine start, SES1. Less than 30 seconds later, T plus 3 minutes 7 seconds is when those payload fairings will jettison, exposing the Starlink satellites to the vacuum of space for the first time. And at T plus 6 minutes 10 seconds, the first stage entry burn begins. That'll last 21 seconds. The first stage landing burn begins at T plus 8 minutes and 5 seconds. It's expected to land on the drone ship. Just read the instructions at just about 8.5 minutes into flight. Then T plus 8 minutes 40 seconds will be second stage engine cutoff, or SECO 1. The Falcon 9 upper stage will enter into a coast phase until T plus 54 minutes 6 seconds, when the second stage engine, or the Merlin vacuum engine, will ignite for 2 seconds. And then the Starlink satellites will deploy T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 22 seconds. And we are starting to get some mission audio and sounds from the pad from SpaceX.
Strong back retract.
As you hear the call for a strong back retract begin, those clamp arms underneath the payload fairings are starting to open up. You'll see the transporter erector, or the strong back, start to recline away from the Falcon 9. And again, it will stay in that tilted back position about 1.5 degrees away from the vehicle for until the point at which it lifts off. See those clamp arms opening up there on your screen. And a really nice view of the new crew access tower. Just taking a look at it, we haven't heard that they've added them yet, but not seeing the emergency egress system baskets on the tower yet, so it looks like that's still an outstanding item for SpaceX to add to that tower before they can support crew mission. T-minus 3 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Do want to thank a few more people for their support before we get into the last couple minutes of the count. Thank you to Chip Sullivan for joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Really appreciate that, Chip. Hope you enjoy the 4K views of this launch and all the other launches for as long as you're with us as a channel member. Thank you. Our thanks to some folks with the super chats. Russell Jones with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Russell, one of our channel members. Brian Copley with
Stage 1 lock load complete.
$4 20-second super chat. You heard that stage 2 LOX loading wrapping up. The last fueling milestone coming up in about a minute from now, when the first stage liquid oxygen fueling will be completely tapped out. Our thanks to Air Force USA with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Air Force. Says, is there a point when they will slow down the launch of the Starlink satellites? Seems like a lot being sent up. No indication that they're going to slow down anytime soon. They're trying to meet some FCC deadlines for launching half of their fleet, so they're going to keep launching as much as they can, as quickly as they can.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
Here they call that LOX load is complete on stage 2. Starting to see some final venting there as we are now 1.5 minutes away from liftoff. Really want to thank Russell Jones for a $5 super chat as well. It says, how many rockets will be lifting off on
Ground gas closeouts.
December 30th? I see multiple launches. We'll take a closer look at that on the other side of the launch. I don't have that info right off the top of my head. But we are now getting into the last minute of the count here. Really appreciate everyone that's with us. If you haven't already, hit the like button real quick and allow more folks to see this live coverage, as we are now just about 50 seconds away from liftoff, listening to the launch director for that final go for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Go for launch.
And you're that go for launch. We have 30 seconds to liftoff. As a quick point of note, our countdown clock is in real time. The one you'll see on the SpaceX screen is on a slight delay. Now 15 seconds from liftoff. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket as it clears the tower. Falcon 9 climbing to deliver 23 Starlink satellites on the Starlink 6-30 mission. Falcon 9 is now 20 seconds into its flight. Now T plus 30 seconds into flight, getting some great tracking views from Chuck Briggs. Now T plus 40 minutes into flight, we're hearing the roar of those Merlin engines here at the press site. Let's listen in. Now about a minute into flight, the Falcon 9 climbing through some clouds, as seen from Pete Carson's tracking camera. Now taking a look at Chuck Briggs here. Falcon 9 now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Falcon 9 passing through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now a minute and a half into flight. We're less than a minute away on the burn of this first stage. The Merlin engine is producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Great tracking views from Pete Carson's from Max Q Productions, as seen from a little bit farther south of here in Vieira. Should be hearing a call for MVAC chill down shortly. The indication that they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine for ignition. Some great colors on the tracking views from Chuck, Adam, and Pete here. About 2.5 minutes into flight, we see MECO, followed by stage separation. We should see the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine momentarily. And there you go. You see the boxes on this screen from your right. That is the slight delay from the SpaceX views. See the first stage falling away in the bottom right-hand corner. And that Merlin vacuum engine coming on and the delay from SpaceX. Now 3 minutes into flight. And some great tracking views from Pete Carson's at the moment. As you see, fairing separation, those two fairing halves glinting as they fall away from the Falcon 9 upper stage. Just a fantastic view here. We'll see the delay on the right. And you can still see them hitting the reflection of that Merlin vacuum engine every now and again. And you can see some stars as the Falcon 9 continues soaring. The glow of the Merlin vacuum engine. Now you can see just on the far left side of your screen as the payload fairings fall just out of view. There was some watching out for the thick clouds rule heading into tonight's launch, but fortunately it's not preventing either the liftoff or our cameras from getting some great tracking shots.
The Eagles on nominal trajectories.
Now a little over 4 minutes into flight. Coming up, the next big milestone will be the first stage entry burn beginning. That'll come up at T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds. That burn lasting 21 seconds. Going around the horn here, 4.5 minutes into flight. At the start of your screen, you're seeing the Merlin vacuum engine still igniting. Or still ignited, I should say. This is from Pete Carson's tracking camera here from Max Q Productions. On the top right-hand corner of your screen, that box representing the first stage of the Falcon 9 booster from the onboard camera. A little dark to see, but in just about a minute and some change, we'll see the Merlin engine on the first stage ignite for that entry burn. On the bottom right-hand corner, that box, of course, is the Merlin vacuum engine from the onboard cameras of the Falcon 9's upper stage. Same thing you're seeing from Pete Carson's tracking camera. Pete, believe, is getting ready for that entry burn, so peeling away from the upper stage to bring us views of the entry burn beginning, so we'll come back to him momentarily. Again, as a bit of housekeeping, the clock that you're seeing in the top right-hand corner of your screen is our countdown clock that is real time for this mission. The clock from SpaceX you're seeing at the bottom center of your screen is coming to us on a slight delay, so that's why there's a discrepancy of about 10 or 11 seconds between those two. Now T plus 6 minutes into this flight.
Vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
About 5 seconds in real time away from the start of the entry burn. Again, the time you want to see at the bottom of your screen is when that will begin for the SpaceX views, but we're hoping that, as we see right here on your screen, that our Pete Carstens was able to catch it, and catch it he did.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
This burn should last for just about another 3 seconds or so in real
Stage
time.
1 entry burn startup.
And that's the end of the entry burn, again in real time. We're seeing that entry burn continue on the SpaceX onboard camera views, though.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And the conclusion of that
Stage
entry
2
burn
FTS is saved.
as we approach 7 minutes into flight. Next major milestone coming up in just a little over a minute from now, when the first stage landing burn will begin. That comes up at T plus 8 minutes 5 seconds. A point of note, though, because it is going to be as low on the horizon as it is, our tracking cameras won't be able to see that from the ground, so we'll keep an eye on the SpaceX onboard camera feeds to see images of that first stage landing. The box on the left will continue to bring pictures from onboard the Falcon 9 rocket. As it approaches its final landing, the box on the right should flip over to cameras aboard the drone ship again.
Stage 1 transonic.
SpaceX is using the drone ship. Just read the instructions tonight. The recovery vessel Bob is going to be scooping up those payload bearings that you saw jettisoned earlier in this launch. That landing burn in real time, starting right now. Coming up in about 5 seconds
Stage 1 landing burn.
on the SpaceX feed. Should be starting right about now. There we go. Touchdown on the drone ship should be coming up at T plus 8 minutes 27 seconds. We'll start to see it coming into view as
Landing
it is
leg
here.
deploy.
And for
Stage 1
the
landing confirmed.
17th time, the booster is up, the booster is down, and SpaceX has another piece of success on its hands, as the first stage has successfully landed on the drone ship. Just read the instructions.
Seago.
And with Seago called, the Merlin vacuum engine will power down for now as the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket goes into a coast phase, taking a look
Insertion.
at the telemetry data for just another moment longer before SpaceX cuts it off here. That upper stage will remain in a coast phase until T plus 54 minutes, 4 seconds, at which point there will be a 2-second burn, and then at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 22 seconds will be Starlink satellite deployment. Really appreciate all of you who've been with us for the duration of our coverage, and Callistia Lee, one of our channel members, for a very generous $20 super chat as we were in the thick of things. Really appreciate that. It says go Falcon, and go indeed it did, as we saw a successful liftoff and landing of that Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number 1062. Want to thank a great bit of channel generosity from Rocket Profit for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. That is very kind of you, Rocket Profit, and wonderful to see that spirit of generosity around the holidays as we are nestled in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So thanks to Rocket Profit for spreading the gift of Spaceflight Now membership, and to those who are recipients of that new channel membership, welcome. Hope you enjoy the perks of that. And Rocket Profit also adds a comment after that, says, to all the newest greenies, those who have the little green bubble with membership, he says, those memberships only last 1 month. After that, it is up to you to continue it or not. And welcome. And yes, we certainly hope those who are getting a little bit of a peek at channel membership, thanks to Rocket Profit, do enjoy being channel members. We'd love it if you'd stick around with us, as got a lot of great things on tap for the rest of the year, not least of which are a Falcon Heavy launch, as well as the maiden flight of ULA's Vulcan rocket coming up at the end of the year. Mission to the Moon will be the first of the CLIPS missions, sending a robotic lander up to the moon. Also want to thank Kirk Earhart for a very generous $100 super chat donation. No message that I see here, but really, really appreciate that, Kirk. Thank you very sincerely for supporting us at that level. And if just scanning the live chat to make sure that Kirk didn't have a question or comment that I may have missed. I don't believe so, but Kirk, if you have a comment or question you'd like to drop here, I'd be happy to answer that for you. But if not, appreciate the silent support. And thanks to one of our channel members, Josh King, for a $10 super chat donation. Really appreciate that, Josh, and thanks for being one of our great channel members. It says, great launch tonight. How was your trip to Starbase? Ah, yes, Starbase was thrilling and exhausting. It was my first time out to Brownsville, Texas, and all the people that I ran into were nothing short of lovely. Lots of folks who traveled from across the country, and some folks from various parts of the world to be there in the run-up to the launch of the second integrated flight test of SpaceX's Starship rocket. It was quite something to see it launch in person. If you do have the opportunity to travel down there, it is a bit of a trek, you know, the southernmost part of Texas, really. But because Starbase lies on a public access road out to the beach there, anyone can drive past and see a good bit of SpaceX hardware in work. Saw at least one booster that was near the road, another that was off in their testing area, and I'm trying to think, at least four or five ships that were just out in the open, and you could see a couple in their high bays with the doors open that were being worked on. So if you are a rocket fan and you want to be able to see some future flight hardware, then you have the ability to make the trip down there. I would say it's worth the trip. Plus, it's near the beach, so having a beach day is not a bad way to tie that all together. Of course, if you haven't already watched our Starship coverage on the channel, we do have a handful of videos up there now, and you can bet your bottom dollar that we'll continue to follow the program as it develops over the next several years, and we'll certainly be making more trips down to Starbase in the future as more launches come up. And lastly, for now, I want to thank Rita Loy, one of our channel members, for another $10 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Rita. It says, welcome to the new members, and yes, welcome indeed. And as we like to do after every mission wraps up, again, as a point of note, because SpaceX is not providing telemetry data or mission audio, we're not able to follow the full span of the mission through satellite deployment here on the live stream, but be sure to stay tuned to our social channels, especially X, for updates on Starlink satellite deployment. But we do want to take a note of where this mission lies in the SpaceX roster now that it is in the books. This was the 17th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1062. This was the 277th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 83rd Falcon 9 launch of 2023. This was the 221st Falcon booster reflight, the 87th SpaceX orbital launch of 2023. This was SpaceX's 94th orbital launch in the last 365 days. Its 157th orbital launch from Pad 40. This was the 212th overall launch from this pad. And this was the 66th orbital launch from Cape Canaveral in 2023. And just to bring this back to graphical representation, as of now, you see launch 87th notched into our bar chart here. Looking for a number of future flights between now and the end of the year. SpaceX getting very close to having a 100 launch calendar year. We'll see if they're able to eke that out before 2023 closes out. They may have to wait till 24 before they're able to get 100 launches in one calendar year, but we'll keep our eyes on that and bring all of those to you as they occur. And our thanks to Callistia Lee, one of our channel members again, for a $20 super chat donation. Really appreciate that, Callistia. Says, thank you, Will, for the awesome coverage. You're very welcome. And thanks to the mods for keeping things smooth in the chat. Yes. And as this is the best channel, that's very sweet of you to say. And I want to double down on your kudos to our moderators, Stephanie B., Astro Joe, and Rusty Shackelford, for always keeping it kosher in the live chat and helping everyone to have a good, hearty conversation about space and space flight and everything going on in this part of the world, while also being kind about it. It's very important for our channel to have a good community, a robust conversation, but, you know, be respectful to everyone as you're doing so. Because while some people are thick in the weeds when it comes to the aerospace industry and space flight, not everybody may be at your level. So if there's a question or a comment that may seem silly to you, well, perhaps someone's just genuinely trying to learn. So a good bit of grace goes a long way, and we appreciate our mods for making that happen. As far as what we're expecting spaceflight-wise over the next week or so, coming up on the 29th, we're looking at a West Coast launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base, a reconnaissance satellite from South Korea, 425 Project EO/IR Satellite 1. And of course, we're also expecting, as has been the case, about 4 days from now, another Starlink launch from here on the East Coast, going up somewhere near the end of the week, likely Thursday or Friday, but be sure to keep tabs on our launch schedule at our website, spaceflightnow.com, for all the latest information on that and other launches coming up around the bend. Want to thank, as always, Pete Carstens and Chuck Briggs for helping us out with tracking this evening. Our ace photographer and stalwart tracker, knocking back mosquitoes to keep eyes on the Falcon 9 from the press side, Adam Bernstein. And also want to thank Michael Kane, off this evening, but always great to help us out when he is able to do some launch photography for us. If you're not following Michael and Adam, these are their handles on X, so be sure to give them a follow, as well as the main Spaceflight Now handle, that is just at Spaceflight Now on X, formerly known as Twitter. You see the strong back already back up in the full upright position, as is now customary for SpaceX as they continue to find ways to increase their flight cadence from their workhorse pad at Pad 40 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. One of our channel members, unfortunately, United Nations Space Command, bummed that missed the liftoff. Well, Ewan, you can certainly roll back the live feed and see liftoff. We don't take down our live broadcasts from YouTube, so you can certainly go back and watch it at your leisure. But being that this is SpaceX, and as we just mentioned, there will be launches about every 4 days or so, weather permitting and all things being equal. So even though you weren't able to be here with us for this one, there will be plenty more around the corner, and we'll be with you for each and every one of them. And like our channel member Callistia Lee signing off, says she has an early morning, we are also going to wrap things up for our live coverage this evening. Want to thank, as always, our man in the chair, Stephen Young, for holding it down on the technical side of our operations, making sure things ran smoothly tonight. And most of all, thanks to all of you who have joined us for our coverage this evening. We do these missions for you and with you, so really appreciate you spending a little part of your Monday evening. A lot of us here in the States coming back to our start of a work week after it was hopefully a wonderful time with family and friends for the Thanksgiving holiday. And if last Thursday was just a Thursday, well, I hope you had a great weekend, and welcome back to the start of a new work week. So for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourself, be good to others, and we will see you next time.